All right, so I got a really good question the other day on a live stream, which was what level is good enough in a language, right? So I think that once you get to like a solid B1 level, which is low intermediate, to where you can talk about most normal everyday things of like, all the things that you did last weekend, last week that are pertinent to you, right? The things that you're going to do or that you have to do or that you want to do this weekend, things you like to do in your free time, right? To be able to have a basic back and forth interaction, get to know somebody and ask about their life and ask about their family and things like that. I think that's a really good point in the language, right? This is the point I want to get to before I start investigating another language, right? And trying to learn it, right? I want to be able to have those conversations and feel confident with it, right? Now, if you get to a B2 level in a language, upper intermediate, I would say it's pretty hard to forget that language because I felt at a certain point I tested into 300 level German classes in college, right? So that was a language that I felt super good with at a certain point. I don't feel as good with it right now, but that's because I haven't practiced it in a long time. But I feel pretty confident that in a month or two, I could take it from that high A2, low B1 it's at right now and bring it all the way back up, right? Because once you get to that B1, especially once you get to that B2, it's really hard to forget the language, right? Just a matter of you have the words in your brain, you just got to refresh them, right? There's certainly, could probably read quite a bit and be like, oh, yeah, I recognize this word, or I can guess this looks similar ish to English, so I can figure it out, right? But I might not be able to recall them, right? But I feel like for me, it depends on how frequently or how deep I want to go with a language, right? If it's a language I want to go really deep with, French, Portuguese, Spanish, or Arabic, I need to get to that B2 level. My Arabic's not at that B2 level, right? If it's a language that's more like maybe like, I call them travel languages, right? Um, that's gonna be like Italian, German, right? Languages where it's like, or Japanese will probably end up being one of these languages. It's like how unless I decide to go deeper with it in terms of literature, right? There's like as long as I'm at B1 and I can go to the country and live my life pretty comfortably and have a good time, talk to people, make friends, that for me is good enough in a language, right? I also wanted to talk about some common confusion that people have in Spanish, right? So one of them is el capital versus la capital, right? La capital of la ciudad is the capital of the city, right? They're both feminine, right? So remember, they're both feminine, right? La capital de la ciudad, right? Now, or I guess maybe I should phrase it as more like la capital es la ciudad, no, because la capital del país. But anyway, capital in terms of capital city is female, la, right? If you start talking about el capital, you're talking about the capital as in the money you have for like a project or something, right? If you start talking about el capital, you mean la capital, that could really confuse some people, right? The other big one that people get messed up, and funnily enough, this just happened in an English class. So it works both ways, where the word library and libreria gets tied together, right? And people both ways think it's a translation, right? Somebody saw library today and they're like libreria, right? Many people, when they're trying to come up with the word for library in Spanish, come up with libreria, but that's not correct. A libreria is a bookstore, right? I'll get to that area ending in a second here. Versus biblioteca is a library, right? Somebody at one point I heard the comparison of a biblioteca is a discoteca for books or something like that. I think that's kind of funny. Maybe that'll help you remember it too. Another thing to think about too is all of those words that end in area, right? They're all specialty stores. They're all stores selling whatever's in the first part of the word, right? So libreria is selling libros, zapateria is selling zapatos, cafeteria is selling cafe, jugueria is selling jugo, jugueteria is selling juguetes or toys, right? Yeah, even a papeleria is selling paper and things like that, right? It's like a stationery store, like a Home Depot, or not Home Depot, like an Office Max or something like that, right? Do you think of any other examples of stores that end in area? Go ahead and put them down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your guys' examples. What else we got here? In Mexico, don't say the word pajilla when you're trying to talk about um a straw. The word for straw in Mexico is popote, right? If you ask for a pajilla from somebody, Mexicans are a big fan of albur, which are just crass sexual jokes based on double entendre, right? If you ask for a pajilla, that is, I'll let you look up what pajilla could possibly mean. But if you ask for a pajilla, they are going to make fun of you, right? It's a pajilla is any adolescent boy's favorite activity when they're alone by themselves. I'll leave it at that. You guys can go look it up more. But don't ask for a pajilla in Mexico. Ask for a popote. The same goes for don't ask for a chaqueta in Mexico, right? Never ask for a chaqueta because that is just a another way of referencing very politely a teenage boy's favorite activity when they're alone by themselves, right? So if you go into a store and ask for a chaqueta and you're there with somebody who's like a little bit younger, a little bit more likely to make fun of you, they will make fun of you, right? The word you need in Mexico is chamarra, right? So never say chaqueta, never say pajilla. Always ask for a chamarra or a popote, right? That's very important. Mexicans will make fun of you, and they will make fun of you for 10 minutes if you let them. Okay, so this I'm working on as well. That how to describe this, like the between the thing, the person, and the verb. If you know one or two of them, you can get to the other one, right? Like for example, if I have gobierno, gobernar, and gobernador, right? So to the government, to govern, and governor, right? I can get from one to the other if I don't know the other two, as long as I know the word for cosa, acción, lugar, and persona, right? So like if I have gobierno and I don't know gobernar and I want to get there, I could ask like, what is the acción related to gobierno, right? Or who is the person that is related to gobierno, right? Same if I don't know, if I have gobernar, right? I'm like, what's the thing that is related to gobernar, right? Maybe you get the person, or the other side is like asking, what is the person, right? That is related to gobernar, right? You're probably going to get gobernador, right? Hopefully you'll get gobierno when you ask about the thing. Maybe you could use the instituto, or thing that might be a little bit more correct, right? And same thing, if I know like gobernador, like, okay, so a gobernador, what is the acción that he does, right? Well, he governs, right? Okay, and maybe I ask like, what the lugar where he works? Well, he works in the gobierno, right? And another theory I'm working on as well, right, is that in regards to the different level of languages, you need to place a different emphasis, right? When you're first starting out in a language, you should be focused on speaking and conquering basic situations, right? You have zero in the language, you need to build up some groundwork of basic phrases and things like that in order to then be able to go back and dissect it and learn the grammar, right? You shouldn't be as focused on grammar, right? Then when you're in like that middle intermediate stage, right? Uh, I guess in that like upper beginner stage, you do have to learn the grammar, right? But you should be focused on those situations and learning the grammar as it comes, right? Not like, oh my God, what is the present tense? What is this tense? That stupid. Learn to conquer situations, learn to handle basic conversations. And then as you see the patterns, and you're like, oh, what is this? I've seen this 3 or 4 times, right? I want to figure out what this means or how this works, right? Then you learn the grammar, right? In the middle, once you're at like an intermediate level, you can have like those basic conversations and you feel like, okay, I can kind of live life, but it's pretty limited, right? I can ask what I'm going to do, what I did last week. I can talk about that basic stuff, but it's pretty limited, right? The answer is to read. You have to read in that intermediate stage because the whole thing there in the intermediate stage is your limiting factor is vocabulary, right? So you have to read. By reading, you're able to one take the time to kind of dissect things. You're able to see like, oh, this is the grammar I've been studying, right? And you also get to pick up words, right? And start off reading things that are simple, right? Books that you've already read, things that are interest to you. If, like I'm really into history, right? So like I read history a lot in new languages. Um, and then once you're at that, once you get past that hump where like vocabulary is your limiting factor, you kind of got to go back to speaking, right? Once you feel like, yeah, all of this, I can kind of talk about a lot of the things, right? You need to go and speak and you need to have a teacher who's going to push you and like ask you weird questions and force you to stretch your limits, right? Because at a certain point, once you're in that intermediate stage, you could stay in that intermediate stage for forever, right? And live your life perfectly fine, right? But you're not going to be able to go above and beyond, right? You if you're not gonna go live in the country, you have to find a teacher who's gonna like push you and ask you weird questions and get you outside of your comfort zone. Start asking like hypothetical things like what would you do if you won the lottery? Right? Make you read weird things, make you read current events, discuss and debate, even though it feels like I know I don't feel like super comfortable. I feel like I'm really, struggling with this. That's the whole point. You gotta struggle to an extent, especially in that advanced stage. You gotta struggle. Right. That's it, this video.